Welcome to the Voice of the Beginning, the Word of the Bible. Before we begin, help us spread the word. Subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share with those you love.
In this opening moment of our journey, we are confronted with the absolute essence of the entire spiritual walk, the very foundation upon which the edifice of faith is built. The Shema Israel, Deuteronomy chapter 6, should not be read merely as a set of legal guidelines or an archaic code of conduct. Rather, it is a burning cry from the heart of God. It is a plea for our love for Him not to be a fleeting feeling, a momentary emotion, or a simple Sunday practice, but the living framework that sustains every fiber of our existence. The text teaches us that true depth of spirituality begins with the recognition of God's oneness and supremacy. The Lord our God, the Lord is one, and this truth must overflow into the teaching of the next generation, becoming the most precious legacy we leave to those who follow us. We are instructed to practice a continuous exercise of internalization. We must engrave the divine words, first upon the tablets of our own hearts, before any attempt to write them on our doorposts or the gates of public life. This is because a faith that does not dwell within, that does not penetrate the deepest layers of the soul is a fragile faith, one that will not survive the test of prosperity or the danger of the cities we did not build. The chapter warns us of one of the greatest risks to the soul, the forgetfulness born of comfortless spiritual slumber that overcomes us when we drink from wells we did not dig, and eat from vineyards we did not plant. When life becomes easy, the heart tends toward self-sufficiency, and it is precisely then that our vigilance must be redoubled. Because of this, we are urgently exhorted to love the Lord with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our strength, implying a surrender that allows for no compartments. Every daily gesture from waking up to lying down, from walking along the road to sitting at the table must be transformed into a conscious and deliberate act of worship. The spirituality described here is practical and omnipresent. It sanctifies both time and space, transforming routine into an altar of devotion. By maintaining a reverent awe as our only effective protection against the idolatry of the predictions and the distractions of the world around us, we are called to a non-negotiable faithfulness. Ultimately, this chapter is an invitation for our identity to be defined not by what we do but by who we love above all things, establishing that obedience is not a burden but the natural response of a heart that has found its true home in the presence of the Most High. As we move forward in our reflection, we are led to understand one of the most liberating yet humbling truths of a life with God. His love for us is not based on our supposed merits, our moral perfection, or our numerical strength. Deuteronomy chapter 7 stands as a monument to elective grace, reminding the people that the Lord chose them not because they were the greatest or the best among the nations, but simply because He loved them and decided to keep the promise made to their ancestors. Spiritually, this teaches us that our security does not rest on what we do for God, but on the unshakable faithfulness and sovereign election of the one who called us out of darkness into His marvelous light. However, this unconditional love carries with it a demand for exclusivity. The chapter summons us to an uncompromising spiritual war against everything that tries to compete for space with the divine presence in our hearts. The 7 nations that Israel was to drive out of the promised land, peoples more numerous and powerful than they were, serve as a spiritual mirror of the inclinations, vices, and hidden idols that persistently try to coexist with the sacred within us. The text is emphatic in declaring that there can be no alliance, no truce, and no blending with the profane. The command to destroy altars and smash the sacred pillars of other gods resonates today as a call for us to deconstruct the mindsets and habits that pull us away from our original purity. God calls us a holy people, a special and exclusive possession, and this holiness is not just a title. It is a condition that demands a radical separation from the currents of this world. This is not about physical isolation, but a distinction of character and values. The promise that accompanies this rigor is one of absolute and supernatural care. The Lord guarantees that if we are faithful in keeping ourselves pure and consecrated exclusively to Him, He Himself will take the front lines of our battles. He commits to fighting our invisible wars, healing the infirmities of the soul, and abundantly blessing the fruit of our land, the work of our hands, and our future generations. Ultimately, chapter 7 shows us that obedience is not a bargaining chip but the only sure path to the fullness of life, revealing that our victory does not depend on our own strength but on the integrity of our communion with the one who loved us first. The human spiritual journey, by divine decree and the soul's necessity, must cross the arid territories of the wilderness. Deuteronomy chapter 8 serves as a compass for moments of crisis, revealing the sacred purpose hidden behind scarcity and deprivation. God does not lead us through difficult paths out of a lack of care. Rather, He does it to test us, to humble us in the holiest sense of the word, and to bring to the surface what truly dwells in the secret places of our hearts. The wilderness is where the masks of religiosity fall away and where we are confronted with our own fragility. In this setting, the manna was not just physical sustenance but a profound metaphysical lesson. It was given so that the people would understand, once and for all, that human beings do not live by bread alone, by what is tangible and material, but by every word, every breath of life that flows from the mouth of the Creator. This chapter is a solemn invitation to deep humility, a call to recognize that the breath sustaining our lungs and the strength moving our arms are concessions from above. The text warns us that the wilderness should not be seen as punishment or abandonment, but as a pedagogy of radical dependency, where we learn that divine provision is both daily and sufficient. However, the spiritual danger reaches its peak not only in lack, but in the transition to plenty. God foresees the moment when we will eat and be full, when our houses will be fine and our herds will multiply. It is in this instant of prosperity that the heart runs the risk of becoming proud and uttering the most dangerous phrase in the spiritual life: "My power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth." Against this subtle pride, we are instructed to remember that the Lord guided us among serpents and scorpions, that He brought water out of the rock, and that He is the only true source of all prosperity. Gratitude, therefore, is not merely a feeling. It is the vigilant sentry that prevents the heart from forgetting the rock that followed us all along the way. If we lose this awareness that we are eternally dependent on grace, we lose the very essence of our identity as the people of God. Chapter 8 teaches us that the secret to inhabiting the promised land lies not in our capacity to accumulate, but in our capacity to never forget where we came from and who sustained us when we had nothing but His promise, to ensure that not a single shadow of illusion remains regarding our own righteousness or moral capacity. Chapter 9 emerges in our journey as a necessary and profound spiritual reality check. With cutting honesty, Moses pulls back the curtain on national and personal pride, reminding the people of their true history, a trajectory marked by rebellion, stubbornness, and being He brings to mind the darkest moment of that journey, the episode of the golden calf at the foot of nowhere. While the glory of God burned atop the mountain, the people below surrendered themselves to the corruption of idolatry. The spiritual message here is one of absolute and urgent clarity. We do not advance toward God's promises because of our own uprightness, our purity, or any intrinsic merit. We enter the promised land exclusively because of God's unwavering faithfulness to His own name and His sovereign victory over evil. This chapter functions as a mirror for the soul, inviting us into continuous repentance and breaking the self-sufficiency that so often blinds us. We are reminded that, at every step, we are the objects of a mercy we do not deserve and a patience that surpasses human understanding. It is a solemn call to look back not with paralyzing guilt, but with the recognition that our spiritual survival is owed to intercession. The figure of Moses, prostrate for 40 days and 40 nights, crying out so that destruction would not consume the people, is the ultimate prefiguration of our dependence on a mediator. Moses teaches us that intercession is what bridges the chasm between our fallibility and the holiness of God. We learn here that true spirituality does not flourish in the soil of religious pride, but in the fertile ground of humility, where we recognize with fear and trembling our constant need for someone to stand in the gap for us. Without this recognition, our faith becomes arrogant and hollow. By understanding that the Lord preserves us in spite of who we are and not because of who we are set free to love Him without the mask of perfection, embracing a life of gratitude for being held by a hand that never lets go, even when our hearts wander along the way. Despite the terrible breaking of the covenant and the fragility shown by the people, the beginning of chapter 10 reveals one of the most glorious facets of the divine character, His tireless disposition to restore. God commands Moses to chisel out 2 new stone tablets, identical to the first ones that were shattered, symbolizing that while His will and His law remain immutable, He always offers the sacred opportunity for a fresh start. This act of rewriting the words of the pact is living proof of a God who does not give up on His children, even when they fail miserably. The restoration of fellowship is not merely a return to square one, it is a move toward a more robust structure of faith. To protect this new testimony, the Lord provides for the construction of an ark made of wood, a sacred vessel, intended to hold His word, and sets apart the tribe of Levi for a specific and vital function, to carry the ark and to minister before His presence. Spiritually, this detailed organization represents the moment when, after a period of falling away or distance, we decide to reorganize our entire existence around what is sacred. Just as the Levites were set apart to carry the glory of God, we are called to consecrate areas of our lives to be vehicles of His presence in the world. The Lord then commands us to arise and resume the journey, an order that carries profound meaning. Divine forgiveness is never an end in itself, nor is it merely relief for a heavy conscience. Forgiveness is, in fact, a new commissioning. He cleanses us so that we can walk again. God's mercy becomes tangible in the fact that, despite our persistent inclination toward error, He still ardently desires to dwell among us. He does not simply forgive us from a distance. He insists on walking with us in the midst of the camp. By renewing the tablets of the law, He invites us to allow these words to be engraved, not just on external stones, but upon the heart of a spirit truly restored by grace. This section teaches us that our past failures do not define our future with God. provided we are willing to carry His presence with the awe and reverence that this new season demands. In this section, which constitutes the spiritual epicenter of our entire journey, the sacred text sets aside ritual instructions to confront us with the ultimate question, one that has echoed through the Pesach centuries to this very moment. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you? The answer that follows is a watershed moment in our understanding of faith, for it reveals that God's will goes infinitely beyond the mere observance of external rituals or hollow sacrifices. What the Lord requires is a total integration of our being, a reverent awe that positions us in our rightful place before His Majesty, a constant walking in all His ways without veering to the left or the right, and a serving with all our soul and all our hearts. It is a demand for love that allows for no divisions. However, the spiritual pinnacle and the most revolutionary concept of this message is the solemn call for each of us to circumcise our hearts and no longer be spiritually. The circumcision of the heart represents a divine surgery of the soul, the painful but necessary process of removing the layers of resistance, pride, and selfishness that create a crust around our will, blocking the full entry of God's light and purpose. It is a radical invitation to vulnerability before the Creator, a stripping away of our deepest hidden intentions. The circumcision of the heart is the authentic seal of the true covenant. It is where dead religiosity dies so that a living spirituality can be born. When this transformation occurs, obedience ceases to be a heavy burden imposed by external laws or the fear of punishment, and instead becomes a fluid, natural response of love welling up from the very center of our being. It is in this state of openness that we allow divine holiness to penetrate even the darkest and most hidden corners of our will, transforming the I into a reflection of the divine us. The circumcised heart is one that has become sensitive to the touch of God, a soft ground where the seed of the word can finally take deep root and produce fruit that lasts for eternity. To close this cycle of profound revelations, we are suddenly lifted to a vision of the absolute and transcendental greatness of God. The text presents the Lord not merely as a local deity, but as the God of gods and Lord of lords, the great, mighty, and awesome God whose majesty knows no bounds and whose authority is unquestionable. He is the one who shows no partiality and takes no bribes, the impartial judge of all the earth. Yet the most staggering spiritual beauty of this conclusion lies in the glorious contrast of His nature. This God who dwells in unapproachable light, who sustains the galaxies and governs the nations, is the same God who stoops with infinite tenderness toward the orphan, the widow, and the foreigner. His greatness does not distance Him from human pain. On the contrary, His true glory is manifested in His justice on behalf of the helpless. At this point, the spiritual roadmap of Deuteronomy issues a practical and urgent challenge. We are called to be the earthly reflection of this divine character. Our spirituality is put to the test in how we treat those who can offer us nothing in return. God commands us to love the stranger and the needy, using our own emotional memory as the ultimate argument, the reminder that we ourselves were once strangers, that we have known the sting of exclusion and the anguish of oppression. Here, faith culminates in a profound ethics of love and social justice. We come to realize that praising God with our lips or raising our hands in worship becomes a hollow gesture if those same hands do not reach out to help the vulnerable. Our vertical worship of God is validated by our horizontal compassion for humanity. As we reach the end of this journey through chapters 6 to 10, we are reminded of the historical faithfulness that underpins our faith. The text forces us to look back at our humble origins. Our ancestors went down to Egypt as just 70 souls, a tiny, fragile group in the face of the world's superpowers. But now, by the mighty hand of the Lord, we have emerged as numerous as the stars in the sky. This is the living testimony that closes our study. God's faithfulness has the power to transform our small, limited, and often flawed history into a narrative of glory, redemption, and eternal multiplication. We are the result of a promise that did not fail, and we are called to march forward under the banner of this God who is once the King of the universe and the friend of the forgotten.
May this word take root in your spirit and guide your steps. If this message spoke to you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.